Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Changing Tides podcast. In each episode, we invite guests to have honest conversations about their mental health journeys with the goal of destigmatizing mental health within the Asian American Pacific Islander community. Due to the nature of the podcast, we'll be discussing a variety of mental health topics and possibly triggering experiences. While we and the majority of our guests are not trained professionals, we encourage you to practice self-care while listening and seek professional guidance if you or a loved one is in need of support. With that said, let's start the episode.
My name is Rivkah Reyes, and I would describe my mental health journey as a haunted, magical roller coaster.
Hello, my name is Matthew Yonemura, and I am the host of the Changing Tides podcast. Welcome back to a new episode, or welcome if this is your first one. We have another great episode for you today. This one is one I've been excited about. We've been planning for a while, and we're finally able to get our schedules aligned to put this episode out. I won't waste any more time, and I'll try to introduce this person subtly. Which I always try to do, but the person's name is always in the title of this podcast, so I don't know why I do this. But anyway, I'm so excited to introduce the guest of this episode. But before we do, I just want to let you know that we may talk about some triggering topics for people. We do discuss substances. We do talk about suicide. So if that might be a triggering topic for you, maybe skip this episode or listen carefully, and if you need to take a step away from the episode or take a break, please do so. Just be mindful of what you need as you listen. But this episode, I was so excited to share the interview that I had with this person who has gone viral many times on TikTok, who has been in big movies, one that you might know from 2003, one of the greatest movies of the 2000s, in my opinion. Social media, they have their own podcast, but I'd love to introduce my interview with Rivkah Reyes. Hello, and welcome to this interview with our lovely guest, Rivkah Reyes. You just described your mental health journey as, I believe you said, haunted, magical roller coaster.
Yeah,
I'd love
yeah.
to hear what this roller coaster is like.
Well, I feel like it's like a roller coaster that's been at the theme park for generations and generations. And somewhere down the line, some crone or like witch put a spell on the roller coaster. And in past lives, like I haven't survived the roller coaster.
Hmm.
In past lives, the roller coaster almost got the best of me and I survived, but then I died from trauma from the roller coaster, you know? And in
Yeah.
this life, I've gotten to, at least in the moment, I feel that magic is a huge part of my life, and I've been able to use some of my own personal magic to kind of reverse the curse on the roller coaster and ride it and get more enjoyment out of it.
Got it. I love that actually. I was blown away by the answer immediately, but I love this description. And now I'd love to get into the non-metaphorical side of this mental health journey.
Okay.
Um, so I'm so sorry. I'm if you're always asked to mention this, but can you please tell our audience where they might know you from?
Yeah, so I am an actor, a musician, and a comedian. You might know me from many things. A lot of people today recognize me from TikTok, which I love. But the people who recognize me from TikTok most widely recognize me from the 2003 classic film School of Rock. I also have been on a couple of TV shows and a few other feature films that were more on the independent side. Recently, I had somebody come up to me and be like, "Oh my God, I loved Monuments," and I was just like, "You saw Monuments? Wow! All right, bet." But yeah, so if you saw Monuments, that's amazing. If you saw A Picture Perfect Holiday on Lifetime this past Christmas season, loved that. That was super fun to work on. But I would say that the credit that I guess globally that I'm most widely known for is School of Rock.
Hmm. And I don't want to spend too much time on that because you're so much more. And I've loved your journey ever since, actually. Like, that's what
Thank
I
you.
really want to talk about. But if you recall, what was your experience like on School of Rock and what's it like looking back? Because you said it's a classic.
Yeah, it is a classic. And I didn't know that we were filming the like one of the best movies of that genre, that
Right.
era. Honestly, like I to this day get people like telling me that it's their favorite movie, and I'm so grateful for that now. Back then, when I was a kid, I again like and I was it's not that I wasn't grateful, but I was definitely an anxious child. So being in front of all the cameras, I wasn't used to that kind of performance. I had been a classical guitarist from the age of 4. Um, and I was used to performing in front of an audience live
Hmm.
and doing my recital. And if I mess up, that's it. And it's still, one performance. Um, on set in front of cameras, you have to do things many times and you have to replicate it
Hmm.
so that you don't mess up the editing, for continuity. And there's a bunch of other factors. It's like you're not you're not yourself. Like I wasn't playing a character when I was doing my guitar recitals, and it was my first time ever acting. It was my first audition, and I was completely going into that audition not expecting anything, which is,
Hmm.
I wish I could say that's how I go into every audition, but it's definitely not like, and I have to reprogram my brain around auditioning now to get back to that place of like, don't expect anything, just tell the story.
Hmm.
And the experience of being on a film set was exhilarating and amazing and incredible, and I loved everyone that I worked with dearly, and still to this day I love them so much. But it was just whenever they called action and it was a shot that I was in, my brain was just, don't mess up the shot, don't mess up the
Hmm.
shot, don't mess up the shot, don't mess up. If you do a bad job in this take, they're going to take you out of the movie, they're going to fire you, they're going to replace you with somebody else. And that was the narrative that was happening inside my head.
Right.
And for a 10-year-old kid, that's a lot to be dealing with. I mean, I was thrust into a job. I had a fucking full-time job
Yeah.
when I was 10 years old. And not a lot of people get to say that.
Hmm.
And, you know, usually, I think most kids, or I mean, definitely a lot of kids that I knew growing up would have killed to be in my position. And I was just so unequipped to navigate it because I really had no experience before. And my mom didn't really have any experience with it either. I mean, she had been a model, but she had never worked on a film set before. And I really just was, I don't know, I'm just kind of doing what they tell me to do, and hoping for the best and just praying to God that I don't mess up a shot. And I think it really does read that way in the movie
Hmm.
when you watch it later. I mean, a lot of people are like, you were my favorite character. I'm like, really? Why? I was so scared to be there. I was like,
Hmm.
there are a lot of shots where you cut to me and I'm just like petrified.
Hmm.
And they, the team, the creative team always say like, that's why we liked you, you're like kind of shy, and then
Hmm.
but then when you put on the guitar you're a completely different person. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because the guitar, it's something that I can like hold and like
Yeah.
hide behind. And I still felt that way for, I mean, the longest time I was doing stand-up comedy with a guitar. And
Hmm.
it wasn't until like 2019 that I stopped doing it with the guitar and just like put it down and was allowed to, like, was able to be myself and not have the crutch.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I definitely, I agree. I mean, I definitely was using the guitar as like this like magic, like weapon to
Hmm.
or a shield or a
Right.
sword that allowed me to be a more confident version of myself.
Hmm.
um and that was what I was working with back then. And I'm just grateful looking back now that I had the experience of being on a film set, because now anytime I'm on set I'm like, this is, oh god, I'm home. It smells like a film set. And even if it's for like a couple hours of work on a commercial or a full month-long movie shoot, I feel so comfortable there now. And I think getting integrated into that at such a young age was really helpful, just knowing like what angles were and knowing all the technical term for things. And yeah, I definitely sometimes when I'll work on a film, if somebody doesn't know a technical term for something, I'll be like, oh, it's actually called this, and I get really excited to like be the mentor, like the friend that like, you know, is like, hey, that's actually, you know, that's what this means and that's what that means. And you know, because there's a lot of fun words that get thrown around on set that people are like, what's that? What's martini? I'm like, that means it's the last shot of the night, BB. Like, you know. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it now.
That's no, I love that, and also like I was a film major in college, so I know like that martini shot, like all those film jargon words like that get thrown around. It's always fun to be like, oh, a friend of mine that's not in film, this is what that means. That's what this means. I hear you on that. And then also, when you said that you came from, being in recitals and music in that sense, I could only imagine how that intensifies you being an anxious child on a film set. And like, you're thinking like, oh, each shot is a recital almost. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sure it was hard for you to be like, oh my, like I could mess up once here or there, and I'm
Yeah, but also with the recitals, I wasn't being paid. You know, it wasn't like
oh,
I
true,
wasn't going to be seen by a million people.
true.
And with the recital, it was just like the people from my music school and
Mm,
my family, and then the other kids in my guitar classes family.
yeah.
You know, and the stakes were a lot lower in a recital, and guitar was something that was really comfortable and intuitive for me.
Mm,
I played when I was 4 years old. I would practice constantly all day, all night. And even with acting, I am a similar way. Like I'll practice my lines over and over and over. And for auditions, it's hard. I mean, definitely before the pandemic, it's like I get one shot at this essentially
mm,
to like do it perfect. And if I even stumble on one thing, I'm fucked and I don't
yeah.
get money, is like the way that I was navigating it before the pandemic. And then pandemic happens and now everything is self-tape and I get to do my own stuff from home and I get to, you know, do the shot over and over and over again until I get it perfect.
Right.
Um, sometimes to a fault where my girlfriend like wants to murder me when I'm doing a self tape, but you know, it's a lot different when like your career is writing on something versus like this is just something for,
Gotcha.
you know, a hobby or something that I like to do after school. Whereas for a feature film with a like famous amazing director who is like world renowned and a team of amazing actors and crew and all of that, like time is money, and I was
Yeah.
very aware of that, and my mom made me very aware of that.
Mm,
Even though I didn't have, you know, much to really do it line wise in the movie, I just was so afraid of like accidentally looking into camera while we were
mm,
rolling and then having to like do the whole thing again. And I know that at the end of the day, like it wasn't that much high stakes as I was putting it on myself to be and like putting that much pressure on myself. But I made it that way in my head
mm.
and allowed myself to kind of spiral, which was really tough. But yeah, it is funny that you said like every take is like a recital. Now I'm like, oh God, yeah, it is very on point.
Mm. And I mean, you're touching on all this. My next question for you, but it has to do with your article in Medium, which is what I read. I was like, oh, this is an amazing story. That's kind of how I wanted to reach out to you for this podcast. But you've already answered a lot of it. But I'd love to hear a bit more about how you got into acting and what it was like for you growing up as a child actor.
Yeah. So again, School of Rock was my first audition. I really came to it through music.
Hmm.
I was a musician first, and I started taking music lessons when I was two, like rhythm and clapping and drumming classes. And then
Wow.
uh, when I was four, the school that I was taking classes at was like, hey, like you're eligible to take an instrument now. What do you want to do? I ended up choosing guitar. And I took guitar lessons with this amazing teacher for a couple years. And then I had done this interview for NPR. Another thing that's like weird for a 9-year-old to do. Like I was on NPR on this show called From the Top, which was like for classically trained children to perform their piece. And if you were charming enough on your phone interview, you'd get to do an interview for the show on NPR.
Wow.
And I passed the test. I was cute enough. And like the most recent thing that had happened in my life that they highlighted on the show was that I had lost the 4th grade spelling bee. It was embarrassing. It was like a really easy word. It was potatoes, and it was a whole thing. And I was traumatized by it, absolutely traumatized, because I'd won the 1st and 2nd grade spelling bee. 3rd grade, I had to take a break. But 4th grade, I got into the spelling bee. First word was potatoes. I did not spell it right. I absolutely butchered it. And it was traumatizing. And I talked about that in my little interview on the phone. They were like, we would love to do a segment on the NPR show where we do a spelling bee where you get to be redeemed and you get to win.
Oh,
and
my
so
goodness.
what happened was they had a couple of the other kids that were featured on that episode come back out for the spelling bee, and they gave them really, really hard words. And then they gave me like notes.
That sounds even more traumatizing to go through it
No, it was
again.
amazing. I liked it because it was like an opportunity for me to like ham it up a little bit. My mom was like coaching me through the rehearsal of like how to really sell the like bit of
Gotcha.
like these kids are having to spell like appoggiatura or something crazy, and they're all like music related words because it was a music show.
Right.
And then for me, when it came to me, they were like, okay, Rivkah, your word is song. And me like getting to act that thing of like pretending to be nervous and then being like,
Okay.
can I hear the word in a sentence? Like, and then spelling it right and getting that redemption. It actually did feel really good. And then a couple months later after that aired, casting for School of Rock came to that show and said, hey, like we're looking for kids who play piano and guitar, and if you have anyone who plays like double bass, and they sent a bunch of kids that were in the age range that they were looking for, and me and Robert Tsai, who ended up playing Lawrence, ended up booking based on our auditions and on our musical abilities, because they think something that the team for School of Rock really wanted was for the kids to actually be able to play, because in some of the scenes we're playing live.
Right.
Which I didn't think about that until very, very recently when I was like having a little Zoom reunion with some of the kids. Like we were playing live, and that's like
Wow.
impressive
That
for
is.
10 to 13-year-old
Yeah.
kids to be doing that live in a film. And like it was all of the classroom scenes where we're playing instruments are live.
Wow.
And that's something that stuck with the Broadway show as well. Like they really wanted the kids in the Broadway show to be able to play live as well, because it's that gratification that you get from seeing these babies playing instruments like really, really fucking well. So kudos to the team for that. I think that's great. And but yeah, being a child actor, I mean, School of Rock was really my only experience of that, aside from theater stuff in my high school. But I was auditioning for everything after School of Rock. A bunch of auditions came my way. I mean, I could talk about everything that I auditioned for, but it would just be boring. But like some of the highlights are like Hannah Montana. Like I was in the running to be Hannah Montana,
Oh my
because that wasn't
gosh.
originally written for Miley Cyrus. Like it ended up being given to her. And I tested for the best friend role. It didn't work
Wow.
out. Things like that. Things like a bunch of Nickelodeon shows, a bunch of Disney things and movies that ended up tanking. So I feel like I'm divinely protected by that. But by the big thing that I did when I was a child was like one of the best movies of all time.
Yeah.
Not to like brag or anything, but I think I'm pretty lucky for that. But of course, in the moment as a kid, it was really hard to face all that rejection, because with the first audition being also the first booking, my mom had this kind of picture in her head that I would be a star immediately after School of Rock, and that everything would be so copacetic, and that the things would just come to me, and that I would book these gigs. And she was really hard on me. My mom's the Asian one, and she's definitely like, was my stage mom and would take me to all my auditions. And I'm really grateful for her to have me basically be her full-time job. Like, I mean, she was taking me to audition, she was flying me across the country for press for School of Rock, and going to, all the fittings and everything, and taking me on all these meetings with managers and stuff like that. And to be sitting in like the office at Nickelodeon at 11 years old is crazy.
Yeah.
And having them talk about my career in front of me, and basically having like my mom speak for me, and me not really knowing what to do or say, because I didn't want to mess anything up for her. And that's like kind of the key thing, is like a lot of it was for her. But now being, somebody who still acts, and I'm still a working actor. I'm in production for, I'm in post-production for one feature, and I'm in pre-production for another that I'm going out to shoot in a couple of weeks. And like, I, I love it every day. And again, like every chance that I get to audition for something, to be on set, to, tell a story on film is a beautiful thing. And it's just an opportunity for me to play. But I certainly didn't always see it that way. I definitely had a bad, not bad, but a really toxic relationship with the industry when I was younger, because I'd gotten this idea in my head that I wasn't pretty enough to be on Disney or Nickelodeon, and I was too tall or too chunky or whatever. And that was not only me that was putting that in my head. Like, I was bullied by kids at school, and have people say that I was like the weird looking one in the cast for School of Rock. Right. And I was just like, what? And it's wild, because like on set, like not to toot again, like, but like all the boys were like obsessed with me on set. and they would put that in writing. I mean, they would absolutely put that in. I had 3 boys on multiple occasions, like, that were coming up to me telling me they had crushes on me and stuff. And I didn't know what to do with that. But I then coming back to school and being like kind of this uggo, in my mind, and to all of them was really crushing. And the instability of like going from that like really warm environment for being on set to back to school and having all these kids. And Chicago kids have no chill, especially Chicago public school kids. Like, we roast hard. Like, I think I've never cried harder than when this girl came up to me in the lunchroom and was like, hey, like, I know I've been kind of mean to you in the past, but like, I think it's really cool that you did the movie. Like, I think we should put all that behind us. Can you sign my lunch card? And I signed her little lunch card, and she tore it up in front of me and threw it in the trash. And I was just like devastated. She's like, you think you're better than me? And I was just like, no, I'm sorry. I don't know what I did wrong. So yeah, I mean, kids are so mean, but yeah, I think I definitely have that like person's voice in the back of my head occasionally, especially when it comes to things like talking about School of Rock in the public eye, and having, people ask me about it. I used to get really fucking uncomfortable and be like, I don't really want to talk about that. Like, I'm so much more than that, which I am, and I know.
Yeah.
But I almost was kind of put up a wall about it, and really thought it was that big of a deal that I couldn't talk about it. But now I'm just an open book, because it like, how dare I not, like, why would it be something that I should be ashamed of? Because I mean, like I said, it inspired a lot of people. That movie made a lot of people want to play instruments or follow their passion, and not just be whatever their parents wanted them to be.
When I read that part about tearing up the paper in your article, I was like, it reminded me of my own weird hangups about school, because like, people could look back and be like, oh, kids are just assholes. But it like it's still, some of that stuff still lingers for a while, I feel like. And like, I'm wondering if is it something that you've thought about, or if you've talked about in therapy or anything? Like, is it something that you cope with, or do you kind of try to put it behind you? Or
yeah, I definitely have put it behind me. It took a lot of therapy and a lot of like reprogramming my brain around certain things, scarcity, and my self-worth, and it took a lot of me not bullying myself, because
Mm.
as a person who got bullied a lot, I just basically was doing double duty for the bullies and making it worse for myself by
Mm.
being like, yeah, they're right. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm the weird looking one. I'm too tall. I'm too ugly. I'm too fat. And like, I protect myself now by not really letting stuff affect me. And when it does, I am able to really like look at why it's affecting me and make it a point to write things out and be like, okay, so like this is why I'm resentful, and this is why I'm afraid, and that's all coming from this repeated feeling from 20 years ago.
Mm.
And I've been here before. I've dealt with this before, and how I dealt with it then might not look the same as how I would deal with it now. And how I deal with it now is looking at the person who, says some bullshit on TikTok about one of my videos or whatever. Even if the comment is like so stupid, if I start to internalize it a little bit, I'll just be like, hey, that person is going through whatever they're going through, and they're just doing what makes them comfortable, and unfortunately that involves being a dick, and
Mm.
like, I wish the best for them. I hope that they are getting whatever they need out of this world, and if they're not, I hope they find it.
Mm. So I am curious about that then. You're talking about how you coped with it then may not be how look like how you would now. But do you mind talking a little bit about how you did deal with it, at like the age of 14 and onward from there?
Yeah. I mean, well, how I dealt with it, I mean, I'm pretty open about this, and in my life, is that I started, to use people, places, and things, essentially, to distance myself from myself. I was, dealing with a lot of bullying. I was dealing with a lot of self-bullying. I was dealing with a lot of pressure from my mom, from the industry, from school, to be XYZ. And I started using drugs. I started drinking really young. I had my first drink, when I was 11, but I didn't
Mm.
start like actually drinking and seeking that out until I was in high school. And drinking and smoking pot and doing, stealing pills and stuff like that, that was my entire high school and college. I mean, really, and then a little bit into my early 20s. I was I mean, I am a drug addict. I just am in recovery now.
Mm.
So yeah, and I was a, codependent. I used people, I would use relationships to kind of escape. Everything was to just escape the reality that was myself, and the truth of me and my existence. And I was willing to like put anything I could get my hands on in front of reality and just use it as a shield, right? Um, and I'm grateful to be out of that, but when it was when it was bad, it was really bad. I mean, there were a couple of times where I was in college, and I, had a couple of suicide attempts and psych ward visits and 5150s. And um yeah, I never quite went to rehab, but I did go through some like intensive like drug and alcohol treatment situations, like with
Mm.
therapists and with my at my college. And ultimately it got to a point when I was 24, 25, when enough was enough, and I knew that the only option for me was to get help,
Mm.
and that no one was gonna, you know, be able to help me if I didn't ask,
Mm.
if I didn't make it known that I needed help. So I did. I moved to LA for acting job, and thankfully got me out of Chicago, where I was doing stand up comedy. And if you're doing stand up in Chicago, you're doing coke.
Oh my
It's hard.
goodness.
Yeah, it's a pretty, I mean, I don't want to blame my drug addiction on the city of Chicago, but it definitely has a big part of it. And now every time I go back to Chicago, I have to be really, really careful with like where I go and who I see,
Mm.
because I'm like one step away.
Mm.
I'm always closer to a relapse than I think I am, but
Mm.
I'm very solid in my like spiritual like growth and my recovery today, where I know that it's not the option. It's never the best choice for me. um, But yeah, I moved to LA for this gig, and some of the people that I was working with were talking. I overheard them, and this one girl goes, "Oh yeah, I don't really drink anymore because it shows up on camera. The older you get, like the more
Mm.
obvious it is, and you get all bloated, and people can see with your eyes. Like, and I just don't want to look like I'm hungover on set." And I was just like, "Oh God, I need to stop drinking."
Mm.
And so the vanity was really the first um, reason I stopped, and then. I realized pretty quickly after I stopped drinking that I was kind of lost without it.
Mm.
And so I needed to find kind of this like community around it. And so have a bunch of sober friends now. We are constantly in communication with each other. I have this like whole network of people that is like a support system. They don't keep me accountable necessarily, but if I am ever feeling triggered or if I'm going through stuff, I mean, basically the whole point of that community is that like we keep each other, um, we just keep each other connected.
Mm-hmm.
We connect with each other to, you know, remind ourselves that we don't need alcohol to connect with other people. We don't need
Mm-hmm.
drugs to connect with other people. We don't need sex to connect with other people, like food or lack thereof, right? And it's been really, it's been it's been like again a haunted roller coaster the last couple of years. It's like a lot of great things have come because of sobriety, but then I also navigated like 2 years of a pandemic and sobriety. And I mean, I always say this like to my other sober friends who got sober during the pandemic. I'm like, I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I'm really glad
Mm.
that I stopped when I did, because I don't think I would have been able to do that like in the midst
Right.
of the pandemic.
We're taking a quick break to introduce Anchor, the sponsor of this podcast. Anchor is free, first and foremost, which is amazing. Who doesn't love free? And you can record everything directly into Anchor. It's so easy to use Anchor. That's how you are listening to this podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple, the Anchor website. You're listening to it because I uploaded this podcast episode to Anchor. If you want to start your own podcast, I highly recommend Anchor. It's made this whole process so easy. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Rivkah, I'm so sorry. I have the worst allergies. I'm going to grab the tissue box right here
Sneeze, do
really
it.
quickly. So give me one moment. I'm going to
You're
mute.
good. My God, you were holding in that sneeze for like an hour, huh?
Dude, I mean, I'm sure I know all Asians have allergies. I have the worst
What are you allergic
allergies.
to?
Oh, dude, literally everything.
I'm
Literally
allergic to
everything.
outside, so and my house. So
I like
yeah.
it's absolutely everything. It's
What do
gotten
you
better.
take? Do you take anything? Like
Just Claritin. I used to get treated for my allergies all the time.
you get like
Uh,
shots?
no, I don't want to talk. I don't want to bore you with it, but it was this weird voodoo doctor thing. He gave you vials. You'd put it to like your head. He'd like, no joke, just go with a laser pointer on your back while you held the vial, and then it helped. It was the
I actually
weirdest.
do want to talk about that. That's amazing. It helped and you stopped going?
Oh yeah, I
What's
like.
that about? Let's pathologize that.
Do you want to keep this in the podcast? We don't have to. I mean,
Hell yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, I guess I'll take some star power away and I'll talk about me here. It like I literally from like third grade to like seventh grade, I'd go weekly to this doctor with all these different vials of like would just be a clear vial, and it would be something like pet allergen, and then the other one would be like pollen.
What's
And
the
dude,
origin of this? Is this like an Asian doctor?
no, they're all white guys. They're just these white dudes with they do what's it called?
Acupuncture?
No, the one where they crack your bones.
Chiropractor?
Chiropractor, and they do that, but they do a weird voodoo version of chiropractor of that, and it's just
Oh my
this wonderful
God.
place that's cured most of my allergies, but it still pops up when I'm doing a podcast.
Wild.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
allergic to cats, and I really would like to not be, because I would love to have a cat. Like I think
Mm.
cats are so cute, and I want to get treated for my cat allergies so that I can have one without dying. But no, I think it's so interesting, like the the like non-Western medicine of it
Mm.
all. I got really into that when I got sober. I like really was anti-doctor for a little while. I was just like, no, all the problems are coming from my spirit. My spirit's not clean. That's what it is. I'm not sick. I'm just spiritually damaged. And I really got into Chinese medicine, and I was taking those like gnarly like herbs that you just like kind of drop on your tongue. And I couldn't really tell if they were doing anything, to be honest, because I'm like one of those people who like tries something for 2 weeks and I'm like, it's not working. And then I stop doing it, when it's usually like a much longer trial period for something to actually work, something like that. But yeah, no, like in on getting back on course, like the topic of like, you know, mental health and stuff. I was always in therapy, like from when I started going to therapy when I was in high school, but it was more of a family situation where my family we all had the same therapist, which is really, really bad. Like, don't do that. Like, if you're a parent and you're listening, you don't want that. Please don't do it. And then I would often go talk to my school counselor because I was just not in a good place. And I got a lot of, you know, help out of that. And then in college, I had a great therapist, and I've been in and out of therapy ever since then. But there was a period of time, like when I, you know, in my early 20s, when I was like off the school's insurance and like couldn't like go really, that I was kind of just running my own life. And when I try to run my own life, things don't really go that well. I have to, you know, surrender most of my control, because it's like looking at the like, you know, pie chart of things that I can control and the things that I can't. The things that I can't control is like most of the pie chart. And then the things that I can control is basically just like my choices and my actions. And I can't even control my thoughts 90% of the time. Like my first thought is always like, or like, fuck, run away.
Yeah.
You know, I always joke about this. Like the first thing I think every morning when I wake up is like, oh, fuck. And then like the second thought is, okay, like, something outside of myself has been keeping me alive for this long. And all I got to do is trust that force and go through my day following that little teeny tiny little pin light that force shines on my path in front of me, and just follow the tiny pin light. Don't think about what's 50 feet away. Think about the one step ahead of me. And I have to take that into like everything, work, relationships, my, you know, everything. I mean, podcast, everything. And it sucks sometimes because I love to trip on the future. I love to get high on the thought of like, you know, settling down and marrying a girl someday and having 10 babies. Like, but I can't really think about that in my relationship right now, because that gets me nowhere. That gets me in the future, which doesn't exist yet. So you know, instead of being all obsessed with what if everybody fucking, you know, hates me? what if I don't get this, that, and the other? Just thinking about like, well, what do I have now? I'm grateful for that. Okay, great. This is what I'm grateful that I have now. What's not working for me right now? Oh, this isn't working for me. Let me not do that anymore.
This is related, I promise, but I'm just curious. Do you watch Euphoria?
Of course.
Okay, great.
Addicted. That's my addiction now.
I mean, I think that's good, but like the content of the show is also so scary. But I think that's a good addiction, right? That's a good.
I think
addiction.
It's healthy. It's cathartic.
Yeah, but
watching Rue's journey makes me not want to do drugs. So hey, that's working. It's doing what it's meant to do.
But literally, and also, but what you're saying reminds me of what Cassie said to Rue. Like, you don't have to be sober forever. One day at a time. Like, but it's
and look how that went for Cassie. Poor thing. Jeez Louise. I fucking love that show. I'm obsessed with that. I mean, we I don't know if you're on the West Coast, but it comes out at 6:00 on the West Coast on Sundays, and the moment it becomes 6:00, I'm just like, okay, it's time, let's go. And we like press play, and oh god, this last episode of play, oh god, I don't want to spoil anything for anyone listening, but dang, Lexi is a G.
And now they drop to be continued on us. But I mean, hey,
wild.
But
honestly, I will say this: like the last shot of the episode being Cassie, like I honestly think that was not the strongest choice. Whatever, this is my stupid opinion, and I'm not nearly as like good of a writer as anyone who works on that show. But like, I don't know. I found that like Cassie's like storyline this episode particularly was like the least invigorating, exciting. Like I'm like, what's happening? Like what's happening to Fez? Like what's happening to Lexi? Like I want to know everything. But yeah, I don't know. I did like the shot itself. It was pretty. She looked like Carrie, like in like Sissy. She was giving me that energy where her eyes were just like, I was just like, oh shit, she's gonna go off. But yeah, I do watch Euphoria. Okay. And it is very that. It is like, you don't have to. You just have to do it one day at a time. Like it's just such a saccharine like thing to say to somebody who's like detoxing off of like narcotics, but it is true. I mean, if I in early sobriety was thinking about 4 years from now, I wouldn't have made it. I would have relapsed. And I'm fortunate to be one of the people who, you know, got sober and stayed sober. Not a lot of us exist. There's like, I think it's like 5% of people who get sober stay sober. And obviously it's like, who knows what tomorrow may bring, but today I am, you know, a little over 4 years sober, and I'm grateful for that. And, you know, not just am I physically sober, but I'm like working on like emotional and spiritual things that help me to maintain that. And that help me to not be essentially like a dry drunk, which is like when you don't drink, but you're an asshole. Which I was like, I mean, for the first 3 months, I wasn't like doing anything aside from just like not drinking. And that's like when I mentioned, like, I very quickly realized I was like, after 3 months of just not drinking and like not really taking any other action other than telling everybody I was not drinking, more for me than for them, and trying to make apologies to people when I wasn't like really aware of how my drinking and my actions had like harmed other people. I you know, continued to burn bridges for the first 3 months of my sobriety until I was like, okay, now I've hit like not only a physical bottom, but also like a spiritual and emotional bottom. So now let me work on those parts of my life. And that's what I'm doing every day.
And you're leading me into exactly what I want to talk about, which is you now. And, you know, like where are you now? What are you up to now? I mean, I know you've discussed so much, but like, how are you, not only like literally with your work, but in your spiritual journey? Like, how are you doing?
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about my podcast, which is called Where Are We Now? I host a podcast that is mostly nostalgic, you know, two child stars talking to each other about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. But it's also a mental health podcast, is what I've realized, is that, you know, the common thread of my work today is that I focus on mental health, and I like to tell stories in my writing about mental health. Not only like my, you know, Medium article or, you know, things that I write that are just from my point of view, but the screenwriting and the filmmaking is I like to showcase different aspects of mental health in my work. And my goal with that, and with the podcast, and with everything that I post online, is that people see it and go, oh my gosh, I see myself in that. Like that makes me feel less alone, because I didn't really have that too much as a kid. Mental health was this like shush thing that was like kind of shoved under the rug, as it is in most Asian families. Like, you know, I had an aunt who had schizophrenia, and my sister had ADHD and was diagnosed with that super young. And, you know, it was a big secret that like we put her on medication, or not we, but my parents and the doctors decided to put her on medication. And that was like, had to be kept a secret from my Lolo and stuff, because the stigma was so strong. But now I'm very vocal about it. I you know, I'm very, very vocal about my diagnosis as a person living with bipolar, and recently was diagnosed with ADHD as well. And, you know, I'm taking medication for all that, and it allows me to like focus and be present and not feel numb, and it allows me to like regulate my emotions, not like to a point where I don't have any emotions, but the high highs don't feel as high and the low lows don't feel as low. And I have a therapist who I meet with a couple times a month, and, you know, she's great. She's also sober, and we have that common language of sobriety. And like I said, I connect with at least, you know, one sober person a day just to see how they're doing and, you know, check in for that accountability and for that connection. I do a lot of work in the recovery space, just, you know, service and speaking to other newly sober people about, you know, what has worked for me and what has worked for my process of recovery. And that really is the foundation of my life. If I don't have my recovery as like a working part of my life, I'm fucked. Everything kind of falls apart. And I mean, even, and yeah, not every day is perfect. Of course, I wake up, like I said, every day I wake up and I'm already crazy. And like, I have to basically make a conscious choice to be serene and to make healthy choices for myself and to not self-sabotage and to not let my inner voice that tells me I'm a piece of shit and that I'm not enough and that I'm never working again, to just chill and sit in the back seat and not let her, you know, voice take over. And again, it's like there's some days where she does take over and I get to look at that day and be like, okay, like what could I do tomorrow to not have another day like that? You know? And if that means I wake up at 5 a.m. and go for a walk around the reservoir and then go work out before I look at my phone, then great, I'll do that. If it means that I sleep in and then when I wake up, I make myself a nice breakfast and don't work out that day because my body needs to rest, so be it. If it means I need to recommit to journaling every day, if it means I need to recommit to not drinking caffeine for a little while because the caffeine with the ADHD medication can sometimes make me feel manic, like then it's like, okay, it's like a lot of it is just listening to my body and then also checking in with my spirit and being like, yo, like spirit, uh, what do you need me to do today? And sometimes I'll just like get like a little to-do list going and not beat myself up if I don't get everything done on the to-do list. But usually the to-do list is like eat, sing, take a shower, wash your floor, you know, do the dishes before you go to bed so you can wake up with a clean sink and not beat yourself up over it, you know, things like that. Tiny little actions of providence, of protection. When you look up providence in the dictionary, it's timely preparation for future eventualities. I know tomorrow I'm going to wake up and think, oh shit, I'm crazy. And like, so what can I do today to prepare for tomorrow when I wake up a psycho? You know?
Yeah. I love all of that. I really love the like, because it like I think routine is great, but like sometimes you need to change it based on how you're feeling. And I loved everything that you said about that.
Yeah, meditation for 20 minutes used to serve me when I was early in sobriety and my brain was so loud. I used to do like Deepak Chopra challenges left and right, where it's just like the 21-day abundance challenge with Deepak Chopra, and listen to a long ass meditation before I do anything. And that doesn't really serve me anymore. Now I'm definitely one of those people who needs to wake up and work out pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
And you know, that's working. And when that stops, if I mean, I hope it doesn't stop working because I do love it. And the community that I've found in like the kind of CrossFit world is amazing. But you know, if that ends up being something that gets in the way or something that just doesn't feed my spirit as much as it used to, then I find something else. Maybe it's like I start reading the books that are on my shelf. Maybe they're all looking at me like, read us. And I'm like, not yet. You're just decoration right now. They're so pretty. They're colorful, you know? But yeah, like I definitely used to have very different devotional practices even 6 months ago than I do now. I mean, part of that too is that I'm in a relationship where, you know, I'm spending a lot more time like not in my own house and you know, what does my morning routine look like when I wake up at my girlfriend's place rather than by myself at mine. And I have to have at least something that I do like for my spirit before I get on my phone and doom scroll on Twitter, Instagram, or check my DMs and see if, you know, see if my manager has anything fun for me to audition for, you know. like I have to do something a little spiritual, even if it's just saying a quick, thank you, God, thank you for, not, killing me in my sleep. Like, yeah, next gratitude list, or, if I wake up with my girlfriend and, she's still asleep, maybe I go upstairs and make some tea for both of us and, sit outside and look at the sunrise and, have
Yeah.
that moment with myself and with my spirit or higher power or God or whatever you want to call that presence, that that force that keeps you alive. um that's really all it is
Hmm.
just staying in the day that you're in.
Yeah. I love all of it. I have some quick fire questions for you. But
Yeah.
before that, do you have anything else you'd like to touch on? Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I mean, it's like obvious. I'm sure, you know, this being a mental health based podcast, like ask for help when you need it and you're not alone. And there are so many resources. I will say I did lose a acquaintance last week to suicide, and
Mm,
it's really been rough on my community, like especially the Chicago community is really heavy right now. And just knowing that that person who was like a hilarious, vibrant soul, like was hurting so badly for so long, and then decided to transition out of this earthly realm, is heartbreaking. But I just want to continue to carry this message of you're not alone, and if you need help, like ask for it, and if you're too afraid to ask for help, um, I feel you.
hmm.
I have to ask for help multiple times in a day, and it's scary, but it's a practice that you can't perfect, and there's no need to perfect the art of asking for help. Um, yeah, I think that's I'll leave it at that.
Hmm. Great. I love it. But yeah, I'd love to get to this quick fire
Let's
questions
do it.
to wrap it up. So first, um, what advice do you have for child actors, young actors?
Do it until you don't like it anymore. And if you are questioning whether you're doing it for yourself or for your parents or for your family, or if you're just doing it for money,
Hmm.
maybe take a pause there and really think about, is this what I want to do? And also, when you don't book a role, it doesn't mean that you're not a good actor. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you suck or anything like that. It just means that you were not the right person to tell this story. And that doesn't mean that you're the wrong person for every story. There are infinite stories that you are going to tell in your life, and you know whether it's something that's seen by millions of people or whether it's a play that's seen by 20 people, it is still a beautiful thing to be able to get on stage or on set and tell a story, and that's all it is at the end of the day.
That was beautiful. I love that. Um, what is a skill you don't have but wish you did have?
I really wish I was one of those people who was able to do like a bullet journal
Hmm.
and like stick to it.
Hmm.
And also, I'm like a horrendous dancer. I'm a mover. I'm
Okay.
not a dancer. I
Gotcha.
can move. Choreography, can't do it.
Okay. Okay. um, Chicago or LA and why? I think I know what you'll say though.
Chicago food, for
Mm.
sure. Chicago community,
Hmm.
definitely. LA weather. LA, my girlfriend. LA, my apartment.
Uh huh.
LA community also.
Hmm.
I found like I at first definitely felt like a lone wolf and like this like tiny little fish in a ginormous pond that nobody would ever care about. But the community is there. You just have to seek it out and go for it. And luckily I've found a lot of queer friends and people of color friends, and I have a huge community of Filipino friends that that I am obsessed with that I didn't have in Chicago.
Mm.
And also the food here is pretty great. I honestly, I miss Chicago food so much. I miss pizza. I miss the real Chicago pizza, not the deep dish that everybody thinks is the real Chicago pizza, but the one that's cut into squares and thin crust. But yeah, I think honestly, LA is my home and Chicago is my hometown. And I'm definitely like one of those people who like loves to shit on Chicago when I am like feeling my LA oats. But then if somebody ever talks shit about Chicago in front of me, I'm like, hey, that's my city you're talking about, bitch. I get really, really CPS on there. CPS meaning Chicago Public Schools, not Child Protective Services. Chicago Public School System. I go real Chicago public school on their asses. I'm very protective of Chicago.
I love Chicago. That's where I went to school.
Where'd you go?
That city, DePaul University.
Oh, dope! I did not get in, but I didn't. But I was between UIC and Columbia, and then I ended up going with UIC. And regretting it, but it's fine. Actually, I don't regret it. I liked UIC fine. It was a good experience, and Columbia is way too expensive. So
yeah, but love Chicago. I agree. Amazing food city. I've lived in Los Angeles pretty much my whole life, but Chicago food is hard to beat. But I love that city.
Yeah, DePaul's got a great film school.
Yep. I loved my time there, loved the program. It's just people are always like, oh, but you left California to Chicago for film school? But
I think you're perfectly justified in that.
Yeah, can't beat the experience.
Yeah, I did a couple of student films for DePaul, and honestly, they were more professional than some of the indie features that I've been on. So,
oof, that's brutal. But hey. If you were a superhero, what would your power be?
Ooh, I used to say that I would like to be able to control time, and I think that shows what kind of a person I was. But now I feel like super strength all the way. This is me being a fucking CrossFit girl. Like have you seen Encanto?
No.
The new Disney movie? It's very good. It's definitely a story about mental health for sure.
Okay.
But Luisa, she's like the strong sister, and she's like, she can carry 20 donkeys at once. And like, I saw that and I was like, that's me. I never felt that way with any other superhero before, but I was just also like the oldest sister, and she has a song about carrying the burden of the whole family. And I'm like, wow, relating. Oop. I feel seen. I'm in this picture and I don't like it. And I think super strength would definitely be my superpower that I would want. I can already kind of read people's minds just, because I'm an empath, but I would always say read people's minds or control time, which is hilarious and definitely shows what kind of a control freak I am. But now it's just like, I just want to be strong enough to like pull myself out of or pull people out of and save people from burning buildings and stuff.
Yeah. Dope. I mean, can't beat it. Great power. Who or what inspired you to do stand-up comedy?
Sarah Silverman, Jack Black. I mean, those are the big ones for sure. Because I was more so doing musical comedy. And then, I mean, a couple of my other influences, all musical comedians like Bo Burnham, Garfunkel and Oates. And then the non-musical comedians that I really was inspired by were, I'll say it, I was an Amy Schumer fan at one point, and then I stopped being an Amy Schumer fan, but her. And I also really loved Richard Pryor. When I was in high school, I took a creative writing class, and one of the parts of class was it was a really dope class actually. Like we wrote a play, and then we had a sketch comedy segment, and then we had a stand-up segment, and I really connected to Richard Pryor and Mark Maron is another one of my favorites. I definitely relate to him a lot in a lot of ways. And I've actually like worked with him,
cool.
Which he's super funny and very easy to get along with. And then who am I blanking on? There was a big one that was huge for me when I was breaking into stand up. Oh my gosh, Tig Notaro.
Oh,
I just love her so much, so dry and so so deadpan. And I can't do that because I have a very expressive voice and face, but I just
uh-huh.
like think she's so weird and so fun and so good. Um, yeah, those would be my influences.
I love all of those. Love Mark Maron. I mostly know his like acting stuff, but I love him and his podcast. Tig, I love. You have a great lineup of influences and inspirations there. I'm a big comedy nerd. Haven't ever done it, but I love comedy.
Yeah, I will
In
also say this is that like I was, in Chicago where I was doing sketch and improv like first. I was at Second City and IO and Annoyance and all that. And I was going to these shows and seeing my friends do stand up. So I was really mostly inspired by my friends. Like, I mean,
mm,
there's a comedian who I'm still really close with named Jake Knoll, who we started in Chicago around the same-ish time. I think they're a little older than me, so they must have started a few years before. They did the comedy studies program at Columbia College, and like, I remember very specifically seeing their set, and then Tien Tran, who is now on the new How I Met Your Father show.
mm,
Like she's amazing comedian. She wrote this song. It was like so good. It's like a bait and switch kind of moment where she's like singing, and it's you get these like kind of like Asian sounding like music styles. It's like in the land that I'm from, where my ancestors like da da da. And then the chorus is her singing about Erie, Pennsylvania, which is like the she grew up, and you think that she's gonna be singing about Vietnam or whatever, but
yeah.
she's like Erie, Pennsylvania. I was like, oh, it's so good. But yeah, I really got a lot of inspiration to do stand up from my friends who were doing stand up, which
That's great.
is a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Hmm. Um, what would the title of your autobiography be?
Oh God. I'm a fucking Leo. It would probably just be my name. Like
Mm,
to be honest, I think I have a very special relationship with my name. Like we don't have to get too into it, but I did choose to honor an ancestor on my mom's side by taking on the last name Reyes, and I chose to honor my Jewish ancestry by taking on the Hebrew version of my name, which is Rivkah. And I just am obsessed with it. I love my name, and when you translate it, like Hebrew words, they mean a thousand things, but some of the translations of that combination of letters in Hebrew is boundaries,
mm,
and Reyes is king, so like maybe like the king of boundaries or something like that. Like we have fun like spin on it.
mm.
King of boundaries. I actually love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, I also think that's a great title, honestly. Um, Finally, you gave a little plug earlier, but please plug anything and everything you have coming up and where people can find you. And even if it's School of Rock and you get residuals from that, still anything.
I do, yeah. So School of Rock is streaming on Paramount Plus and I think other things. You can probably find School of Rock anywhere. But I think, yeah, Paramount Plus being primarily the place that it's in right now. My Instagram and TikTok are both at Rivkah.Reyes, and my Twitter is just Rivkah Reyes, no period. I have a Patreon where you can get some ad-free episodes of my podcast, Where Are We Now, which you can find also on Spotify and all of the places that you listen to podcasts. And yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of projects coming up that I haven't been publicly announced yet, but just follow me on social media and you'll get all the updates as they come.
Great. We're going to be sure to tag everything in the description of this. But Rivkah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It was a joy. And yeah, hopefully we'll talk soon or connect somehow.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you again to Rivkah for joining us and sharing about their mental health journey and everything that has come along with it. It's been a long journey for Rivkah. I think I can't think about my mental health journey as a 10-year-old, but Rivkah can. So it's been a long journey for Rivkah, and I'm wishing them all the best moving forward. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to our show for our episodes releasing on every other Tuesday. Give us a rating or a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you would like to support our podcast and help us grow, you can do so with a donation to the link at the bottom of the episode description. To hear more about Changing Tides, follow us on Instagram at LTSC_Changing Tides, or check out our website, thechangingtides.org. Let's continue to change the tides on mental health.
Yeah.